So here's the installation portion of the databases. So we'll have Jonathan share his screen.
Oh, okay.
And go to open up Google. And you're going to search Google for SQL Server download. It's that first link. So there's different editions of SQL Server, okay? But what we're looking for, so there's the very, very like minimal installation comes by default on Windows operating system. So there is a version of SQL Server that already runs on your operating system, but it's a file base. It's not a server. You know, it doesn't take requests from outside your computer. Where SQL Server, the database itself, it takes requests from another computer, and it'll serve up the data, you know, providing that you send the right commands to it. And that's the one that we're actually looking for. So if you scroll down just a little bit, instead of installing one of the paid versions, there's a developer edition. That developer edition is the fully blown version of SQL Server in its entirety. The only difference between this edition and one of the ones on top is that you can never run it as a production server. So if you created something that you're going to go make money on, you could not run it. You technically you could run it, but you're violating the end user agreement. This is strictly for developing. They're giving you all the features, everything that you can ever imagine about SQL Server. Now, if you want to run something in production and it's low key, you can download the Express, but the Express, even though it's free, there's a limit of 2 gigs, or it might be 4 gigs. And if you're going to run something that you're going to make money on, chances are your database is going to go beyond the 4 gig size or the 2 gig size. I forget what the cap is on the size. SQL Server, its full version, can handle, before it begins to lose performance, it can handle up to 127 petabytes of data.
Wow.
So let's move up to petabytes.
Yeah.
You have kilobytes, you have megabytes, you have gigabytes, and then you have terabytes. The next one is petabytes. So
Wow.
each one is multiplied by 1,000. So 1,000 kilobytes is 1 megabyte. 1,000 megabytes is 1 gigabyte. 1,000 gigabytes is 1 terabyte. 1,000 terabytes is a petabyte. So it can handle a lot of information. So let's go ahead and start downloading this. Go ahead and save it to your downloads or wherever. And double click on it. And hit yes. And we're gonna just do a basic installation. We don't need to do anything custom. You can just go ahead and accept the terms. And that's fine. That wherever you're installing it is perfectly fine.
So I like what Microsoft does is that they have you download like this really small pre-installer. And then when you click on that, then it goes and grabs all the media and everything that you need to install and installs the full-blown version. Hey, you got a pretty fast connection there.
Oh yeah, it was actually kind of slow when we first started. You were kind of lagging a little bit, but it's going pretty fast.
Nice.
So it just finished downloading. Now it's installing. It installed, I think it's like 7 gigs. Man, your machine's fast.
Oh yeah.
Is the editing becoming easier and faster for you? Oh yeah. Yeah, it's becoming easier now.
All right. So now that we're at the end of the installation, okay. So all this stuff, it's useful, but it's not anything that you need to keep track of. What we've done so far is we've installed a service on your machine. There's no way to access the service. There's no like when you install Excel or when you install Word or when you install some application, it's like the application launches and you can start working with it, right?
Mhm.
SQL Server is just a service that runs in the background. There's no UI. So instead, what Microsoft did is they created another developer tool called SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS for short. And you'll see it's the third button on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to install SQL Server Management Studio. And you'll see the download link right then and there, right there. And go ahead and save that and run it. Well, when it finishes downloading. So yeah, it's just a service. Think of this. Let me give you the analogy. Think of SQL Server as your credit card processor. So you have the credit card processing service, but in order for you to process a credit card, you got to have the hardware. In order for a person to insert their credit card or slide it or tap it, whatever, and that communicates with your credit card processing service. So you could change that interface anytime, but your service is always there. Your credit card processing service, how you connect to it, whether you're using the Square on your phone, whether you're using a point of sale system, or you may, use some other credit card transaction unit, but it always connects to the credit card processor. And so SQL Server is the same. The SQL Server is just a database that sits in the background, but you need a separate user interface, to connect and query the data.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And I use credit card processor because, you work in the food industry. So I'm sure you would be familiar with that. Oh, so just like this is perfect. This is a perfect analogy because you probably didn't order the credit card service, but whoever did had to go and connect the credit card processor, right? The hardware that's at the restaurant. But when people order on the website, they connect to your processor through a different method, but it's still your credit card processor. It's the service, right? That hasn't changed. So that's kind of the same thing here. We're going to use whatever SQL Server comes with, which is the Management Studio, but we can also create our own, and we can go and connect through C#, and we're going to see how that kind of pans out. So go ahead and close this.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go and do a search on your, yeah, you can go ahead and close this as well. And let's go do a search for SSMS. If you hit your little window down at the lower left-hand corner,
Mm-hmm.
and then just type in SSMS. There it is, the Management Studio. I normally pin it. All right, so here's what we got. Let's explain this first screen, okay? This first screen is the way that you connect. So you can essentially connect to a database anywhere in the world that is running SQL Server. And this is where you would put that destination is in the server name. So you can actually put an IP address and enter the right port. I think it defaults to port 4 something. I forget what the port is for SQL Server, but it connects through that port wherever you're going to connect to. Because you installed it locally and because we want to connect to your local database, it defaults to your computer name. So open up a terminal real quick. So if you just do window R CMD, type in CMD. and then type in set and hit enter. And if you look for your machine name, if you scroll up, they're in alphabetical order. So if you scroll up to where it says machine name or computer name, that computer name matches what's in that prompt. Go back to that prompt.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to connect using your computer name. Now, this is fine and dandy, but I would never remember this. And I wouldn't expect anybody, not even, to remember their computer name because this is a random name. So instead, there's some aliases. And one of the alias is just a period, a simple period. That is the same thing as what was just in there. Now, that's kind of subtle. And you're like, is there something there? Is there not? And you got to consider the fact that some people need glasses in order to be able to see up close. And so just that little period is something that could be missed. So instead, what they did is they said, okay, we'll connect to localhost. So get rid of the period and you can do localhost. All one word, all lowercase. That itself is the same thing as your computer name and the period. The official SQL Server method is local inside of parentheses.
Okay.
That's the official. And we're going to use your credentials. So automatically, it takes your user and it says, you are the database administrator. You have God rights over this database. So we're going to use Windows authentication for now. All right.
We are in the database.
Yes, we are. So there's a couple of things that I want to change. Okay. And one of the things is that when we install the basic version or the basic installation, it only uses Windows authentication. SQL Server has two ways of authenticating. And what I mean by authenticating is username and password, right? So it's integrated right now with Windows. And so all it does, it just takes your user and it says, Windows, has this person been authenticated? Yes, they have. Give me a token. Let me let them in. But what we want to do is we want to change that so that we can use an administrator. And there's a default administrator that comes installed, but it's disabled. So if you go to security, if you expand security and you go to logins, you'll see that SA, which is system administrator, the one on the bottom, the SA is a system administrator to the database, but it's disabled because it has that what do you call it? That little X. But even if you enable it right now, it won't work. What we got to do is we got to change a setting in the database itself. So if you right click on the local, way up on top where it says local SQL Server, and you go down to properties, and then you head into security. You see how right now it's only using Windows authentication mode? We want to use what they call mixed mode, which is both SQL Server and Windows. So select the second one and hit OK. And this is, go ahead. It tells you, essentially what it's telling you is like, look, these changes won't take effect until you restart SQL Server. So the service that's running in the background needs to be restarted. And the way that you can do that is right click on local again and restart. There's a prompt that comes up. Yep. Hit yes. And we'll let it shut down and restart. So we're back. Okay, now let's go back into that security folder. No, you got to go down. No, not here.
Whoops.
Yeah, the security, expand that, and then go into logins. And now what we can do is we could right click on that SA and go to properties. And in here, you're going to want to put a password that only you remember. And don't make it a password that's super difficult or needs to be super secret. In fact, since this is just running on your local machine, we could probably just use, we can get away with password 1 exclamation point. So it'll be capital P, capital B password 1 exclamation point.
Hold on. One exclamation point.
And then repeat that. All right. And then let's go ahead and hit OK. All right. So now, right now, you're connected as Jonathan. So let's right click on local and disconnect. And then we're going to go and click on connect again and connect to a database engine. And this is on your local, but we're going to switch to SQL Server. You see the Windows authentication?
Mm-hmm.
Switch that to SQL Server authentication and put in SA and type in the password. And then remember the password. And connect. What does it say? Account is to say, oh, we have to enable the account. So, okay, so go and click OK. Go back to Windows authentication and connect again. And go back to security and enable the SA. You have to go into the properties. And we're going to go down to status and enable. Yep. You got to disconnect first. There you go. Look at you looking like a pro already. And then remember the password and connect. Yes. So now you're connected as the system administrator.
Mm-hmm.
So you were the system administrator, but it was under your identity. Now we've completely disconnected from the Windows Identity Service, and we're using the SQL Server Identity Service. And it's using the system administrator or the SA user to connect. Now that we've got SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio installed, we'll continue on with the meat and potatoes of working with SQL Server.